Austin, confusion ricocheted across the border Friday as a federal appeals court blocked the Trump administration's policy of returning asylum seekers to Mexico to await court hearings, a practice immigrant advocates have denounced as inhumane and deadly.
An earlier decision Friday by the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco dealt a blow to the Trump administration. The process, called the Migrant Protection Protocols, or MPP, also known as Remain in Mexico, had been seen as a successful tool in President Donald Trump's asylum crackdown.
Throngs of migrants in the program flocked to international crossings across the border, including Matamoros, Ciudad Juárez, Nogales and Tijuana, buoyed by the chance of being let into the U.S. The crossing this morning remained under heavy guard.
But the decision, and migrants' hopes, lasted only a few hours. About 7 p.m. Friday, the Ninth Circuit judges granted an emergency stay on the injunction, as requested by the Trump administration, effectively reinstating MPP while further arguments are heard. The case appears to be headed to the U.S. Supreme Court.
This evening, with support of DOJ attorneys and CBP's declaration, the Ninth Circuit granted a stay of its earlier order enjoining MPP. Acting CBP Commissioner Mark Morgan tweeted late Friday, "At CBP will immediately reinstate MPP."
Since the U.S. Department of Homeland Security rolled out the program in January 2019, the U.S. government has sent back more than 60,000 people to 7 Mexican border cities from Tijuana to Matamoros. Those included some of those most dangerous areas of the border, exposing migrants to assaults, kidnappings, murders and extortion.
In a court filing Friday, Robert Perez, CBP's deputy commissioner, said there are an estimated 25,000 migrants currently in the MPP program. Halting the policy would create an enormous strain on border facilities and personnel if those migrants suddenly needed to be processed into the U.S., he wrote.
U.S. authorities have argued that the policy keeps migrants from slipping into the U.S. and deters other migrants considering crossing from the U.S. southern border.
Earlier Friday, advocates and migrants' attorneys applauded the initial decision, denouncing the MPP program as inhumane and a violation of international rights for migrants.
"This is really a tremendous decision recognizing the illegality of the Remain in Mexico program," said Alyssa Steglich, co-director of the Immigration Clinic at the University of Texas School of Law in Austin, who makes regular trips to Texas border towns to interview MPP migrants and monitor their legal proceedings. "It means that asylum seekers can now have access to the U.S. asylum system in a humane way."
News that the MPP program had been temporarily halted spread quickly through the shelters and makeshift camps along the U.S.-Mexico border, where migrants await their asylum hearings.
In Matamoros and Ciudad Juárez, dozens of migrants flocked to the international bridges hoping CBP agents would pass, only to find the bridge closed and riot-geared police patrolling nearby. The Paso del Norte International Bridge and port of entry in Juárez, across from El Paso, was temporarily closed because of the dozens of asylum seekers congregating there.
In Nuevo Laredo, site of widespread kidnappings and assaults on migrants, shelters quickly filled with the buzz of the MPP policy potentially ending. Pastor Lorenzo Ortiz, who oversees 2 shelters there, said he was fielding calls from migrants asking if they should rush to the bridge.
"There was a little bit of a panic," said Ortiz, who runs 2 shelters filled with MPP migrants in Nuevo Laredo.
"The ruling created some conflict and confusion," he said. "I'm telling people to just wait, don't do anything wrong that could impact your case."
Ortiz said he hopes the U.S. government takes the steps they did when throngs of Cuban migrants piled up at the foot of the bridge in Nuevo Laredo after the government abolished the wet foot, dry foot rule, which eased the way for Cubans reaching U.S. soil to stay in the U.S.
After that measure ended in 2017 under President Obama, Customs and Border Protection officers took around 20 to 30 Cubans a day until they were all processed into the U.S. within about 9 months, he said.
Ortiz said he doubts he will see the same orderly reaction this time around.
"It sounds like good news, but I don't think it'll really be good news," he said. "Trump will find a way to stop this."
In its earlier decision, the Ninth Circuit reinstated a lower court's injunction blocking the Trump administration from enforcing a rule that made migrants ineligible for asylum if they crossed the U.S.-Mexico border in between the ports of entry.
11 migrants sent back to Mexico under the program, and a collection of 6 civil rights advocates, including Innovation Law Lab, Al Otro Lado and Tahira Justice Center, filed a lawsuit last year, arguing that the policy violated U.S. immigration law.
The U.S. government rolled out the Migrant Protection Protocols in San Diego Tijuana in January 2019. It later began sending asylum seekers to Mexico in Calexico Mexicali at the California border, El Paso Ciudad Juárez, Brownsville Matamoros, Laredo Nuevo Laredo and Eagle Pass Piedras Negras along the Texas border, and Nogales, Sonora, at the Arizona border.
Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf issued a statement calling the earlier injunction grave and reckless, while also accusing the judges of bypassing Congress and undermining the Constitution.
He referred to the Migrant Protection Protocols as a game-changer that has allowed the U.S. government to process meritorious claims more quickly and to reduce fraudulent claims.
By implementing MPP, we have also effectively reduced the incentive for smugglers and traffickers to use children in their illicit cross-border activity, Wolf said. Should this ruling stand, the safety and security of our border communities, international relationships and regional stability is at risk.
Human Rights First has counted 1,001 cases of attacks on MPP migrants, including kidnappings, rape, torture, murder and at least 228 kidnappings or attempted kidnappings of children.
In a recent report, Doctors Without Borders also reported that, in October alone, 75% of the migrants in the MPP program they spoke to in Nuevo Laredo had been recently kidnapped.
The Labor Union for Federal Asylum Officers, the American Federation of Government Employees Local 1924, condemned the policy in an amicus briefing filed in June to go along with the lawsuit. MPP abandons our tradition of providing a safe haven to the persecuted and violates our international and domestic legal obligations, the union wrote.
Scott Weaver, an Austin attorney representing more than 50 MPP clients in Matamoros and Nuevo Laredo, said he was encouraged to hear of the court's earlier decision but didn't know what it meant for his clients.
He feared ICE would now detain MPP migrants in U.S. immigration detention facilities as their asylum process played out, which would be better than the Mexican border towns they're currently in but still not ideal, he said. He would prefer to see them paroled during their court process, he said.
Migrants granted parole are allowed to be placed with a sponsor in the U.S. and required to attend their asylum hearings.
I'm concerned about what happens next, Weaver said. I'm sure there'll be more hurdles for my clients.
As the policy is debated in court, a key question remains, what happens to the 25,000 migrants currently in Mexico in the MPP program as the legal fight plays out?
There should be immediate relief for those currently in the MPP program, Steglich said. Right now, it's unclear what will happen.
Rafael Carranza covers the border and is based in Tucson, Arizona. Jervis is based in Austin for the USA Today network. Follow Rafael Carranza and Rick Jervis on Twitter, @Rafael Carranza and @MRR Jervis.